Laid. Jay, I hope your wife gets well soon. The doctor's at your house every day. I looked up from under the hood of my battered Ford pickup, wiping my hands on an oil-stained rag. Greta stood at the edge of my driveway, her perfectly coiffed gray hair catching the last rays of September sunlight. At 58, she had the sharp eyes of a hawk and the gossip instincts of a tabloid reporter. If she's sick, it's news to me, I said, forcing a laugh that tasted like battery acid. Maybe she's allergic to honesty. Greta's eyebrows shot up like twin exclamation marks. She leaned closer, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Well, I don't want to pry, but Dr. Williams has been coming by almost every afternoon this week. Always parks right there. She pointed to the spot where my wife Laura usually parked her pristine Honda Accord. My stomach dropped like a stone into dark water. Dr. Scott Williams, Laura's colleague at the Riverside Medical Center. Smooth-talking, silver-haired, married with 2 kids and a reputation that sparkled like his expensive watch. Thanks for letting me know, Greta, I managed, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest. I'll make sure to ask Laura about it. After Greta shuffled back to her house, probably already composing tomorrow's neighborhood bulletin in her head, I stood alone in my driveway. The wrench felt heavy in my hand, like it was made of lead instead of steel. Jason J. Fairburn, 41 years old, owner of Fairburn Home Repairs, former amateur boxer with hands that could fix anything except, apparently, his marriage. I'd built my business from nothing, working 16-hour days to give Laura and our daughters the life they deserved. Beth, 13 and sharp as a tack. Janie, 7 and still believing the world was full of magic. Laura had always been the golden one. Valedictorian in high school, full scholarship to medical school, respected physician with a corner office and patients who adored her. Meanwhile, I was the guy who showed up at school events with dirt under his fingernails and calluses on his palms. But we'd been happy once, or at least I thought we had. That night, Laura came home late, claiming she'd had emergency surgeries. She kissed my cheek with lips that tasted like peppermint and lies, then disappeared upstairs to shower. I sat in my recliner, staring at the ceiling and listening to the water run, wondering when everything had started falling apart. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I drove to Best Buy and purchased a small security camera system, the kind used for home monitoring, professional grade, motion activated with smartphone connectivity. Keeping an eye on things while you're at work? The teenage clerk asked as he rang up my purchase. Something like that, I replied. I spent my lunch break installing the cameras, one in the living room, disguised behind a picture frame, another in the kitchen, tucked between cookbooks. I told myself I was being paranoid, that Greta was just a nosy old woman with too much time on her hands. But paranoia, I was about to learn, could be a survival skill. The first footage arrived on my phone the next afternoon while I was replacing a client's kitchen sink. The motion alert made my phone buzz and I almost ignored it. Then I saw the timestamp, 2:47 p.m. Laura should have been at the hospital. My hands shook as I opened the video feed. There was Laura, wearing the blue dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year. She was laughing at something, her head thrown back in genuine delight. I hadn't seen her laugh like that in months. Then Scott Williams walked into frame. He was everything I wasn't. Tall where I was average height, refined where I was rough around the edges. He wore his success like an expensive cologne, and it was obvious why women found him attractive. He moved through my living room like he owned it, comfortable and confident. They talked for a few minutes, standing close enough that their shoulders touched. Too close. Way too close. Then Scott's hand found Laura's waist, and she didn't pull away. My phone screen cracked. I'd been gripping it so hard that the glass spiderwebbed under my thumb. The video continued. They moved toward the stairs, Laura leading the way. The camera couldn't capture what happened next, but I didn't need to see it. My imagination filled in the blanks with vivid, painful detail. 23 minutes later, they came back downstairs. Laura's hair was messed up, and Scott's shirt was wrinkled. They stood by the front door, talking in low voices I couldn't make out through the camera's audio. Then the front door opened, and 7-year-old Janie walked in. Scott jumped back from Laura like he'd been electrocuted. His face went white as paper, and he practically ran for the back door, leaving through the kitchen without even saying goodbye. Janie looked confused, asking Laura who the man was. "Just a friend from work, sweetheart," Laura said, her voice steady and calm. "He stopped by to drop off some papers." I wanted to punch something, hard. The lies came so easily to her, like she'd been practicing them. And the carelessness, having her affair in our home while our daughter could walk in at any moment. It was beyond disrespectful. It was dangerous. That night, I couldn't eat dinner. I sat at our kitchen table watching Laura help Janie with her homework, listening to her ask Beth about her day at school. She was the perfect mother, the perfect wife, playing her role with Oscar-worthy performance. "You seem quiet tonight," Laura said as we got ready for bed. "Everything okay?" I looked at her in the bathroom mirror. This woman I'd loved for 15 years. This stranger who was destroying our family. "Just tired. Long day." She nodded and went back to brushing her teeth, humming softly. The same song she used to hum when we were dating, when she'd stay over at my apartment and we'd talk until sunrise about our dreams and plans. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling and planning my next move. Because this wasn't going to end with a confrontation or couples therapy or any of that civilized nonsense. Laura had made her choice, and now I was going to make mine. The gloves were coming off. I spent the next week conducting surveillance like a private investigator, except I was investigating my own life. The security cameras captured everything. Scott's Tuesday visit that lasted an hour and 15 minutes, his Thursday afternoon house call that ended with him and Laura sharing wine in my kitchen, using the glasses we'd received as wedding gifts. Each video was another nail in the coffin of our marriage, but I watched them all. I needed to understand the scope of the betrayal, to map out every lie and deception. Knowledge was power, and I was going to need all the power I could get. Mike Torino found me at the Riverside Boxing Gym on Friday night, pounding the heavy bag like it owed me money. Mike and I had been friends since high school, back when we both thought we might make something of ourselves in the ring. Now he ran Torino's Towing, a business that operated in the gray areas between legal and profitable. "You're going to break your hands if you keep hitting like that," Mike said, holding the bag steady. He was built like a fire hydrant, short and thick, with arms that could bend steel and a heart that was surprisingly soft. "Maybe that's the point," I grunted, throwing another combination that made the bag shudder. "Want to talk about it?" I stopped punching and pulled off my gloves. The gym was nearly empty, just a few diehards working out under the fluorescent lights. It smelled like sweat and determination and broken dreams. "Laura's having an affair," I said. Mike didn't look surprised. "The doctor? You knew?" "I suspected. Greta Wilcox has been spreading rumors at the diner for weeks. You know how she is." Mike handed me a towel. "What are you going to do about it?" "I don't know yet, but it's not going to be pretty." Mike studied my face for a long moment. "You want payback? Make it hurt. But do it smart, Jay. Don't do anything that'll hurt the girls or land you in jail." That weekend, I expanded my investigation. I followed Scott's BMW from the medical center to a seedy motel on the outskirts of town called the Riverside Inn, the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions about fake names on the register. I parked across the street and waited. 20 minutes later, Laura's Honda pulled into the lot. She looked around nervously before getting out of her car, then practically ran to room 237. Scott was waiting for her, opening the door before she could knock. They stayed inside for 2 hours and 14 minutes. I know because I timed it, sitting in my truck and feeling my heart break into smaller and smaller pieces. This wasn't just a fling or a moment of weakness. This was a full-blown affair, complete with secret meeting places and elaborate lies. When they finally came out, Laura looked different. Younger somehow, like the weight of our marriage had been lifted from her shoulders. She was glowing with the kind of happiness I hadn't seen from her in years. It should have made me glad to see her happy. Instead, it made me furious. That night, I made my first move. I waited until 3 a.m, then drove to the medical center where Scott's BMW was parked in the doctor's lot. He was pulling a night shift in the emergency room, probably saving lives and being a pillar of the community. I had a bag of sugar from our kitchen pantry and a small knife from my toolbox. The sugar went into his gas tank, which would turn his engine into expensive scrap metal within a few miles of driving. The knife made quick work of his rear tires, leaving them flat but not completely destroyed. Then I took a used piece of protection from the gas station bathroom and placed it on his windshield with a note written in block letters, "For your next house call." I was back home by 4 a.m., slipping into bed beside Laura like nothing had happened. She stirred slightly, but didn't wake up. I lay there listening to her breathe, wondering if she dreamed about him. The next morning, Laura was unusually chatty at breakfast, asking about my plans for the day and making small talk about the weather. She seemed nervous, fidgeting with her coffee cup and checking her phone every few minutes. You seem stressed, I said, buttering my toast with deliberate slowness. Maybe you should see a doctor. Very funny, she replied, but her laugh sounded forced. I am a doctor. Not unless he makes house calls and brings wine. The color drained from her face. For just a moment, her mask slipped, and I saw the guilt and fear underneath. Then she recovered, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I don't know what you mean by that. Don't you? I took a bite of toast and chewed slowly, letting the silence stretch between us. Just seems like you've been having a lot of medical emergencies lately. Very dedicated of you to make house calls. Laura's phone buzzed. She grabbed it eagerly, probably hoping for a distraction from our conversation. But when she read the message, her face went white as paper. Everything okay? I asked innocently. Fine, she said quickly, shoving the phone into her purse. I have to go. Emergency at the hospital. She kissed my cheek and hurried out, leaving her coffee unfinished and her breakfast untouched. Through the kitchen window, I watched her sit in her car for several minutes, talking frantically on her phone. Phase 1 was complete. Now Scott knew he was being watched, and Laura knew her secret wasn't as secret as she thought. The psychological pressure was just beginning. I spent the morning doing what I did best, fixing things that were broken. I had 3 jobs lined up, all of them straightforward repairs that would keep my hands busy while my mind worked on the bigger problem. But first, I had a stop to make. The Riverside Diner was the unofficial headquarters of the town's gossip network, and Greta Wilcox held court there every morning from 9 to 10:30. I found her at her usual booth, surrounded by 3 other neighborhood women who hung on her every word like she was delivering the evening news. Jay, she called out when she saw me. How's Laura feeling? Any better? Actually, I wanted to thank you for mentioning the doctor visits, I said, sliding into the booth beside her. You were right to be concerned. The other women leaned forward, sensing fresh gossip like sharks smelling blood in the water. Oh? Greta's eyes lit up with interest. Yeah, turns out Laura's been having some personal medical issues. Female problems, you know? Very embarrassing for her. Dr. Williams has been making house calls to help her through it. I lowered my voice to a confidential whisper. She's been seeing him privately to avoid any awkwardness at the hospital. The women nodded sympathetically, but I could see the wheels turning in their heads. By lunchtime, half the town would know that Laura was having female problems and seeing Scott Williams for private treatment. The rumors would grow and mutate, becoming more salacious with each telling. Well, I'm glad it's nothing serious, Greta said, though she looked slightly disappointed that the story wasn't more scandalous. Oh, it's serious, I said, standing up to leave. Very serious, but I'm sure Dr. Williams will take good care of her. He seems very dedicated to his patients. I left them to chew on that and headed to my first job of the day, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The game was just beginning, and I was already 3 moves ahead. The beauty of a small town is that everyone knows everyone else's business. The curse of a small town is that everyone knows everyone else's business. I was about to turn that curse into a tool. By Wednesday, the rumors had evolved beyond anything I could have imagined. At the hardware store, the clerk mentioned that he'd heard Laura was having fertility issues. At the gas station, the attendant asked if it was true that she was seeing a specialist for women's troubles. The story had grown legs and was running through town like wildfire. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Melanie Crawford, Laura's best friend since childhood, and the head nurse at Riverside Medical Center. I was replacing a garbage disposal for Mrs. Henderson when my phone rang. It was Beth, calling from school. Dad, can I go to Emma's house after school? Mom said she might be late tonight. Another emergency? I asked, though I already knew the answer. I guess. Melanie picked me and Janie up yesterday too. She said Mom had to work late. The pieces clicked together like a perfectly fitted joint. Melanie wasn't just Laura's friend. She was her accomplice. She was providing alibis, watching the girls, and probably covering for Laura at work too. That evening, I decided to do some reconnaissance. I drove to the medical center and parked where I could see both the main entrance and the doctor's parking lot. Laura's car was there, but so was Scott's BMW, now sporting 2 new tires and probably a rebuilt engine. At 7:30, they came out together, walking close but not touching. They got into separate cars and drove in different directions. Laura headed home. Scott went toward the Riverside Inn. I followed Laura, staying 3 cars back in traffic. She didn't go straight home. Instead, she stopped at the grocery store, spending exactly 23 minutes inside. When she came out, she had 2 bags of groceries and the look of someone who'd been establishing an alibi. She got home 15 minutes before I did, just enough time to put away the groceries and change into comfortable clothes. When I walked through the door, she was helping Janie with her homework at the kitchen table, the picture of domestic tranquility. "How was work?" I asked, hanging my jacket on the hook by the door. "Exhausting. We had 3 emergency surgeries today. I barely had time to grab lunch." She didn't look up from Janie's math worksheet, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. "That's rough. Good thing Melanie was able to pick up the girls." Now she looked up, her eyes sharp with suspicion. "How did you know about that?" "Beth called me. She wanted to make sure it was okay to go to Emma's house tomorrow." Laura relaxed slightly. "Oh, right. Yes, Melanie's been a lifesaver. I don't know what I'd do without her." "I'll bet you don't," I thought. That night after Laura fell asleep, I went through her purse. I felt like a criminal, but desperate times called for desperate measures. Her phone was password protected, but I knew Laura well enough to guess it. Janie's birthday followed by Beth's. The text messages were a goldmine of evidence. Dozens of exchanges between Laura and Scott, ranging from innocent workplace chat to explicitly intimate content that made my stomach turn. But it was the messages between Laura and Melanie that really opened my eyes. "Can you cover for me tomorrow afternoon? Scott and I need to talk." "Of course. I'll tell Dr. Martinez you're doing a consultation in Millfield." "You're the best. I owe you dinner." "Just be careful. Greta Wilcox has been asking questions." I scrolled back through weeks of messages, watching the conspiracy unfold in real time. Melanie had been facilitating the affair from the beginning, providing cover stories, watching the children, and even helping Laura shop for lingerie that I'd never seen. But there was something else in the messages, something that made my blood run cold. References to the plan, and after the divorce, and when this is all over. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning to end their marriages and start over together. I took screenshots of everything, storing them in a hidden folder on my phone. Then I put Laura's phone back in her purse and went to the kitchen to think. The next morning, I made another anonymous call, this time to the medical center's administration office. "I'd like to report a concern about patient confidentiality," I said, disguising my voice with a slight accent. "I believe Dr. Williams and Dr. Staples may be conducting unauthorized private consultations outside the hospital." The receptionist took down my information, promising to pass it along to the appropriate department. I hung up knowing that Scott and Laura's cozy arrangement was about to get a lot more complicated. Then I drove to Melanie's house. She lived in a tidy duplex on the east side of town, the kind of place that looked respectable from the outside, but probably had thin walls and thinner bank accounts. I knocked on her door at 9 a.m., knowing she worked the afternoon shift at the hospital. Melanie answered in a bathrobe, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She was attractive in a girl-next-door way, with kind eyes and a warm smile that probably made patients feel better just by looking at her. "Jay, what are you doing here?" "I wanted to thank you for helping out with the girls," I said. "Laura's been working so many late nights lately." "Oh, it's no problem. You know I love Beth and Janie like they're my own." "That means a lot, especially with all these medical emergencies Laura's been handling. Very dedicated of her to make house calls." Melanie's smile faltered slightly. "House calls? You know, the private consultations with Dr. Williams? Very professional of them to provide such personalized care." The color drained from Melanie's face. She knew that I knew, and she knew that I knew she knew. The web of lies was starting to collapse under its own weight. "I should go," I said. "Don't want to keep you from your morning routine. Say hi to Laura for me when you see her today." I walked back to my truck, leaving Melanie standing in her doorway with her mouth hanging open. By the time I reached the end of her street, she was already on her phone, probably calling Laura with a full panic report. Good. Let them panic. Let them scramble and make mistakes. The hunter was becoming the hunted, and I was just getting started. That afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. "Mr. Fairburn, this is Dr. Martinez from Riverside Medical Center. I need to speak with you about your wife." My heart stopped. Had something happened to Laura? Had my games gone too far? What about her? "There have been some irregularities in her schedule lately. Unauthorized consultations, missed shifts. I was hoping you might have some insight into what's going on." I almost laughed. Laura's affair was about to cost her job, and she didn't even know it yet. I'm sorry, doctor, but Laura doesn't discuss work with me. She's very professional about maintaining patient confidentiality. Of course, well, if you notice anything unusual, please don't hesitate to call. After I hung up, I sat in my truck for a long time thinking about what came next. The psychological pressure was working, but it wasn't enough. I needed something bigger, something that would shake the foundations of their perfect little affair. That's when I remembered the boxing gym and Mike's words about making it hurt. It was time to escalate. The Riverside Inn looked even seedier in broad daylight, like a movie set, after the cameras stopped rolling. I parked across the street and waited, my hands steady on the steering wheel, despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Scott's BMW pulled into the parking lot at exactly 2:15 p.m., followed 3 minutes later by Laura's Honda. They were getting careless, arriving so close together that anyone watching would know they were meeting intentionally. I gave them 10 minutes to get settled, then walked across the street and knocked on the door of room 237. "Room service," I called out in a high-pitched voice. The door opened, and Scott Williams found himself face-to-face with the husband of the woman he'd been screwing for the past 2 months. He was wearing a hotel bathrobe and nothing else, his silver hair mussed and his face flushed with guilt and panic. "Hello, Scott," I said calmly. "We need to talk." Behind him, I could see Laura scrambling to cover herself with a bedsheet, her eyes wide with terror. The room reeked of sweat and desperation, a combination that made my stomach churn. "Jay, I can explain," Scott started. "No need." I pushed past him into the room, closing the door behind me. "I think I've got a pretty good handle on what's going on here." Laura had managed to wrap herself in the sheet, but her hair was wild and her lipstick was smeared across her cheek. She looked like a stranger, this woman I'd been married to for 15 years. "How did you find us?" she whispered. "Small town, Laura. People talk, especially when you're stupid enough to have your boyfriend make house calls while our daughter is at home." Scott stepped between us, trying to assert some kind of authority. "Look, Jay, this is between adults. There's no need for—" I grabbed him by the throat and slammed him against the wall. He was taller than me, but I had 40 pounds of muscle and 15 years of rage on my side. His feet left the ground for just a moment, and I saw real fear in his eyes. "The only reason you're still breathing," I said quietly, "is because I don't want my daughters visiting their father in prison. But if you ever set foot in my house again, I'll put you in the hospital you work at. Are we clear?" Scott nodded frantically, his face turning red from lack of oxygen. I released him, and he collapsed against the wall, gasping and clutching his throat. "And you," I turned to Laura, who was pressed against the far wall like she wanted to disappear into it. "You want to throw away 15 years of marriage for this piece of garbage? Fine, but you do it honestly. No more lies, no more sneaking around, no more using our friends to cover for you." "Jay, please." "I'm not done." My voice was steady, but inside I was screaming. "You want a divorce? Ask for one. You want to be with him? Move out. But stop pretending to be a loving wife and mother while you're screwing around behind my back." I pulled out my phone and showed them the screenshots I'd taken from Laura's messages. Both of them went white as paper. "I have copies of everything, every text, every lie, every time you used Melanie to watch our kids while you were here playing house. So here's what's going to happen." I looked directly at Scott, who was still rubbing his throat. "You're going to end this affair today. You're going to transfer to another hospital, preferably in another state, and you're going to stay away from my family." Then I turned to Laura. "And you're going to decide what you want, him or us, but you don't get both. Not anymore." I walked to the door, then turned back for one final shot. "Oh, and Scott, next time you want to have an affair, try not doing it in a place that charges by the hour. It's beneath even you." I left them there, half-dressed and terrified, and walked back to my truck. My hands were shaking now, the adrenaline finally catching up with me. But I felt lighter than I had in months, like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The confrontation was just the beginning. Now came the real work. That evening, Laura came home 3 hours late, her eyes red from crying and her hands shaking as she tried to act normal around the girls. She made dinner in silence, responded to Beth and Janie's chatter with distracted nods, and avoided looking at me entirely. After the girls went to bed, we sat in our living room like strangers waiting for a bus. The silence stretched between us, heavy with 15 years of shared history and 2 months of betrayal. "What happens now?" Laura finally asked. "That's up to you." "I never meant for it to happen this way." "But it did happen." The question is what you're going to do about it. She started crying then, big, messy sobs that shook her whole body. I don't know. I don't know anything anymore. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to hold her and tell her we could work through this. But that part was getting smaller every day, overwhelmed by anger and disappointment and the growing realization that our marriage had been over long before she started sleeping with Scott Williams. Figure it out, I said, standing up. But figure it out fast. The girls deserve better than this. I went to bed alone that night, listening to Laura cry in the guest room down the hall. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions, new consequences for the choices we'd all made. But tonight, for the first time in months, I slept peacefully. The war was far from over, but I'd won the first battle. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange kind of limbo. Laura moved into the guest room and threw herself into her work, leaving early and coming home late. Scott Williams, true to his cowardly nature, had called in sick for 3 straight days after our motel confrontation. But I wasn't done with either of them. The first domino fell on a Thursday morning when Dr. Martinez called Laura into his office. Through my network of contacts, including a janitor at the medical center who owed me a favor, I learned that Scott was being investigated for unauthorized private consultations and potential ethics violations. The second domino was Melanie, who found herself under scrutiny for providing false alibis and covering up scheduling irregularities. Her supervisor had started asking uncomfortable questions about her relationship with Laura and whether she'd been compromising patient care to facilitate personal matters. The third domino was the one I'd been saving for last. I waited until Friday evening, when the whole town would be gathered at the Riverside Community Center for the annual charity auction. It was the kind of event where everyone who was anyone showed up to see and be seen, where reputations were built and destroyed over cocktails and small talk. Laura had planned to skip the auction, claiming she was too tired from work, but I insisted we go as a family, putting on a united front for the sake of the girls. She agreed reluctantly, probably hoping to avoid the gossip mill that had been churning her name for weeks. We arrived fashionably late, Laura looking stunning in a black dress that hugged her curves and made her look like the successful professional she was. Beth and Janie were excited to see their friends, and for a moment we almost looked like a normal, happy family. The community center was packed with familiar faces, neighbors, colleagues, local business owners, and town officials. Greta Wilcox was holding court near the silent auction table, no doubt spreading the latest rumors about everyone in attendance. I made sure to work the room, shaking hands and making small talk with people I'd known for years. I was Jay Fairburn, local businessman and devoted family man, playing my role to perfection. "Jay," called out Tom Harrison, who owned the Ford dealership where I'd bought my truck. "Good to see you. How's business?" "Can't complain. Plenty of things need fixing in this town." "Ain't that the truth?" "Hey, I heard Laura's been working some long hours lately. Everything okay?" I glanced across the room to where Laura was talking with a group of other doctors, her smile bright and professional. "You know how it is in medicine? People get sick at all hours." Sure, but I heard she's been doing some private consulting work too, house calls and such." The gossip network was working exactly as I'd hoped. Tom's innocent question was really a fishing expedition, trying to confirm or deny the rumors that had been circulating for weeks. "Laura's very dedicated to her patients," I said carefully. "Sometimes that means going above and beyond normal office hours." Tom nodded knowingly. "Well, that's admirable, though I suppose it can put a strain on family life. Every marriage has its challenges." As the evening progressed, I noticed Scott Williams hadn't shown up. Smart man. His absence was almost as conspicuous as his presence would have been, and people were starting to ask questions about where the good doctor was hiding. The auction itself was a typical small-town affair. Donated services, gift baskets, and artwork created by local high school students. I bid on a weekend getaway package, not because I wanted it, but because it made me look like a man without a care in the world. It was during the live auction that I made my move. The auctioneer, a local radio DJ named Pete Morrison, was trying to drum up enthusiasm for a dinner package at the town's fanciest restaurant. The bidding had stalled at $300, and Pete was working hard to push it higher. "Come on, folks. This is for a good cause. Don't you have someone special you'd like to take to Romano's? A romantic dinner for two?" That's when I raised my hand. "I'll bid $500, I called out loud enough for everyone to hear. The crowd turned to look at me, and I felt Laura's eyes burning into the side of my head. Pete's face lit up with excitement. "500 from Jay Fairburn? Do I hear 6? "Actually," I said, standing up so everyone could see me clearly, I'd like to make this interesting. I'll bid $1,000, but only if the winning couple agrees to share their romantic dinner with Dr. Scott Williams and his wife." The room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the polished wooden floor. Laura's face went white as a sheet, and I could see her hands shaking from across the room. I continued, my voice carrying easily in the stunned silence. Dr. Williams has been so dedicated to making house calls lately, such personal attention to his patients. I think he deserves a night out. The gossip mill exploded into overdrive. People were whispering furiously to each other, putting together pieces of a puzzle they'd been working on for weeks. Greta Wilcox looked like Christmas morning had come early. Pete Morrison, bless his heart, tried to salvage the situation. "Well, that's a very generous offer, Jay, but I think we'll stick to the original terms." "Oh, that's okay," I said cheerfully. "I withdraw my bid. Wouldn't want to make anyone uncomfortable." The damage was done. In 30 seconds, I'd confirmed every rumor, answered every whispered question, and destroyed whatever was left of Laura and Scott's reputations. The beauty of it was that I'd never actually accused anyone of anything. I just made a few innocent observations about Dr. Williams's dedication to house calls. Laura grabbed my arm as soon as the auction ended, her fingernails digging into my skin through my jacket. "What the heck was that?" she hissed. "What was what? I was trying to be charitable." "You know exactly what you did." "I made a bid at a charity auction. If people want to read something into that, it's not my fault." But it was my fault, of course. Every word had been calculated, every pause timed for maximum impact. I just ended Laura's career in this town as surely as if I'd taken out a full-page ad in the local newspaper. We drove home in silence, the girls chattering excitedly in the back seat about the friends they'd seen and the prizes they'd watched get auctioned off. They had no idea their parents' marriage had just died a very public death. That night, after Beth and Janie were asleep, Laura packed 2 suitcases and loaded them into her car. "I'm staying at Melanie's for a while," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Probably for the best." The girls, "We'll be fine. They'll stay here in their home with their father who never lied to them." Laura started crying again, but this time I felt nothing. No sympathy, no regret, no desire to comfort her. She'd made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. "I never wanted it to end like this," she whispered. "Neither did I. But you ended it the moment you brought him into our house." She left without another word, her taillights disappearing into the darkness. I stood in my driveway for a long time, breathing the cool night air and listening to the silence. It was over. 15 years of marriage, gone. But for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The next morning, I made pancakes for Beth and Janie, explaining that their mother was going through a difficult time and would be staying somewhere else for a while. They took it better than I'd expected, with the resilience that children somehow manage in the face of adult disasters. My phone rang while I was cleaning up the breakfast dishes. It was Mike from the boxing gym. "Jesus, Jay, I heard about last night. The whole town's talking about it." "Good. Let them talk. You realize you just nuked your wife's career, right?" "She nuked it herself. I just lit the fuse." Mike was quiet for a moment. "So what now?" I looked around my kitchen, at the home I'd worked so hard to build and maintain. It felt different now, lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted from every room. Now I rebuild, without her. 3 months later, the divorce was final. Laura had moved to another state, taking a job at a hospital where nobody knew about her affair or her very public humiliation. Scott Williams had done the same, his marriage as much a casualty of their affair as mine had been. Melanie lost her job at the medical center and moved away shortly afterward, her reputation as damaged as her former friends. The conspiracy had collapsed under the weight of its own deception, taking down everyone involved. I kept the house, got primary custody of the girls, and watched my business grow as words spread about my reliability and integrity. Funny how destroying someone else's reputation can enhance your own, especially when you're the wronged party in a small-town drama. Beth and Janie adjusted to their new reality with the adaptability of children. They saw their mother every other weekend and during school breaks, but their home was with me. I made sure of that. On a warm evening in late spring, I was working in my garden when Greta Wilcox wandered over from next door. She looked older somehow, like the excitement of the past year's drama had taken a toll on her. "Beautiful evening," she said, admiring my tomato plants. "Sure is." "You know, I never did thank you." "For what?" for proving me right about those doctor visits. I knew something wasn't quite right, but everyone thought I was just being a nosy old woman. I smiled, remembering that first conversation in my driveway, the moment when everything started to unravel. Sometimes being nosy pays off, Greta. Indeed it does. She paused, studying my face. Any regrets? I thought about it for a moment, really considered the question. Did I regret destroying my wife's career? Did I regret the public humiliation, the gossip, the way I'd systematically dismantled her life? No, I said finally. No regrets. Because the truth was, Laura had made her choices long before I made mine. She'd chosen to betray our marriage, to lie to our children, to involve our friends in her deception. She'd chosen Scott Williams over 15 years of marriage and 2 beautiful daughters. I'd simply chosen to make sure everyone knew about it. As the sun set over our quiet neighborhood, I went inside to help my daughters with their homework, to make them dinner, to tuck them into bed and read them stories about heroes and villains and the importance of doing the right thing. They were my world now, my reason for getting up every morning and working hard every day. Laura had thrown away the chance to be part of that world, and now she was living with the consequences. Justice, I'd learned, wasn't always served in courtrooms. Sometimes it was served at charity auctions, in small-town gossip networks, and in the simple act of refusing to let someone destroy your life without consequences. The war was over, and I had won, not through violence or illegal schemes, but through patience, intelligence, and the willingness to play the game better than my opponents. Laura was gone. Scott was gone. And their conspiracy had crumbled into dust. But I was still here, still standing, still fighting for the people who mattered most. My daughters deserved a father who wouldn't let anyone walk all over him. They deserved to see that actions have consequences, that betrayal comes with a price, and that sometimes the good guys really do win in the end. I'd given them all of that and more. And I'd done it without compromising my integrity or breaking any laws. The house was quiet now, filled with the peaceful sounds of a family at rest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to build something better from the ashes of what came before. But tonight, I was content to sit in my living room, surrounded by the life I'd fought so hard to protect, knowing that sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to let someone destroy you. Laura had tried to burn down everything we'd built together. Instead, she'd only succeeded in burning herself, and I was fireproof.